Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wassalatu wassalamu ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa ashabihi at-tayyibin at-tahirin. I bear witness that no one deserves to be worshipped except Allah Ta'ala, the one who has no partner and no similar, the one who has no length and no width and no depth and no perimeter, the one who is not a volume and is not in a place. And how could he be in a place when he existed before time and space? He created everything except himself, including you and your actions. Nothing occurs except by his will, both good and bad, he destined to happen. He speaks without sound, letter, or language, not Arabic, Hebrew, nor Korean. He's not light. He's not a spirit. He has nothing in common with human beings. He's not in the direction of up, down, right, left, front, nor back. And whatever you imagine in your mind, Allah is different than that. And I bear witness that our noble, unrivaled master, Muhammad, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, is the slave of Allah, his final messenger, and the best of all of God's creations. May Allah unite us with him in paradise and grant us a drink from his basin. And may Allah increase us in patience, humility, knowledge, and comprehension, and help us to put our knowledge into practice and grant us all sincere intentions. Ameen. We're continuing in the book, the Hadrami Introduction, which is an introductory text in Shafi'i fiqh written by the Allama Bafadl Al-Hadrami rahimahullah. In the book, we've made it to page 7. I believe we were actually on letter I, but I said we just go back to H to start at the top of the page. So we are on what? Page 7 of the book. It said, well, we're talking right now about the things that are recommended to do as part of your wudu. We already talked 2 classes ago that there are only six things that you have to do for your wudu to be valid. As long as you've done those 6 things, then your wudu counts. It means you made a valid wudu. You have wudu. If you did what? Just 6 things. But on top of those 6 things, there are a lot of additional things that are recommended to do in the wudu. And you want to make sure you do those things as well, because we only live for however much time. And in that time, we need to get as much reward as possible. We can't afford to be skipping these additional ways to get reward for ourselves. So on page 7, top of the page, letter H, we're talking about one of the things which is not required in your wudu, but if you choose to do it in your wudu, and of course the intention of doing it is that you're following the sunnah. If you choose to do it in your wudu with that intention, then these actions are rewardable. These actions are what? Rewardable. It says letter H, to wipe both ears, outward and inwards, with fresh, new water. And to wipe the ear holes with fresh water. So we were saying at the end of last week that one of the sunnahs of the wudu, one of the things which is not required in your wudu, but nonetheless all of us should be doing, is that we should wipe our ears. And he specifically says to wipe the inside part of the ear, which is the part with the folds here, and to wipe the outside part of the ear, which is the back part here. And the way you want to wipe it, the soundest opinion is that you take your index fingers on both sides, you put the index finger inside the ear canal and rub it around, and then you take the index finger and you rub all around all the folds on the outside of your ear. Then you take your thumb and you put it on the back side of the earlobe and you wipe the back of the ear with your thumb from the bottom up to the top. And then you take your palms, which still have not rubbed against anything, so the water there is still, hasn't gotten anything on it. You take your palms and you just place them on the outside of your ear so that you kind of like wipe the whole outside of the ear with the palms. This is the soundest opinion. But as I mentioned last time, there are many Shafis, including those in Yemen, of my sheikhs who taught me when I was in Yemen, who instead of putting the index finger into the ear canal, and then wiping the folds with the same index finger. What they do is they just kind of put their finger at the entrance without sticking it in, and they wipe all the folds with the index finger. Wipe the back with the thumb, as we said, go like this, and then the pinkies, which still haven't wiped anything, they put the pinkies into the ear canal at the end and go like that. This way, if there's dirt on your index finger from the inside of the canal, you don't end up wiping it on the folds. Some people do it that way, and this is a way that's also being taught and passed down. And we mentioned that, you know, my sheikhs in Yemen, they used to say that if you do all of the sunnahs of wudu, you'll end up wiping your ears 15 times in the wudu. Why is that? Because one of the sunnahs of washing the face, or one of the sunnahs of wudu, is to go beyond the boundary of the face when you wash it. So when you wash your face, you're going to also wash your ears, because you're going past the boundary of the face, and the boundary of the face goes right up to the ear. So if you go past that boundary, you're going to be washing your ears each time that you wash your face. So if you wash your face 3 times, you're going to wipe over your ears 3 times. And then when you wipe your head, you go like this. But they say when you go like this, you should also, as part of the motion, wipe over your ears like that. So if you're going to wipe your head 3 times, you're going to wipe over your ear 3 times then as well. So before you even get to the part of the wudu when it's time to wipe your ears, you've already wiped them 6 times. 3 times while you were washing your face, 3 times while you were wiping your head. Then when it comes time to do the ears, you're going to do the canal and the folds in the back 3 times. That's 7, 8, and 9. You're going to go with your hands like this 3 times. That's 10, 11, and 12. And if you do the pinky thing, you'll do the pinky thing 3 times. That would be 13, 14, and 15 times that you've wiped your ears in the course of the wudu. So let us know that, or let us remember and keep in mind that wiping the ears is a sunnah of the wudu, and let us be careful to make sure we do it. What's next in the list of sunnahs of wudu? Letter I. It says to interlace the fingers with one another. Okay, this one pertains to when you're washing the hands. Okay, so when you're washing your hands to the elbows, one of the sunnahs is that you take your fingers and you interlace them like this. Okay, you put one hand on top of the other and you put your fingers between the fingers of one hand, between the fingers of the other hand, and you go forwards and backwards like this so that you can wash in between the fingers. Okay, this is one of the sunnahs of wudu. And this is something that you do when you're washing your hands. But then letter I continues. It says, and to interlace the toes using the little left finger, starting with the little right toe, working up to the little left toe. So when it comes to doing your hands, the sunnah is to interlock your fingers like this. But when it comes to doing the toes, the way you interlock is by taking the pinky of your left hand, putting it on the underside of your right foot. So just pretend this hand here is my right foot. I'm going to take my left finger. I'm going to insert it from the bottom of the foot between the pinky toe and the ring toe. And then I'm going to do between all the toes with the pinky of my left hand like that. And then after I've done the right foot, I'll continue with the left foot, starting with the big toe, going over across the left foot until I end with the pinky of my left foot. So you start with the pinky of the right foot and just go across all the toes to the pinky of the left foot. This is how you do interlacing for the feet. Now, so I think they mentioned it in the previous chapter. Yes. So in the previous chapter, when we mentioned that one of the absolutely vital parts of wudu, one of the obligatory aspects that you cannot leave out, is to wash your face. This was in the previous chapter. And at that time, they mentioned that it's recommended to interlace your fingers into your beard. So one of the sunnahs of wudu, which is not mentioned here in letter I because they mentioned it in the earlier chapter, is after you wash your face, the man with the long beard, he takes his fingers and he inserts them into his beard from the bottom and pushes them through the hairs of the beard. Okay, kind of like that. At the end of after washing the face in your wudu. What other sunnahs of wudu do we have here? Letter J, he says succession. Okay, by succession, what he means is that you don't waste time in between the parts of the wudu. When you finish one part, you move quickly to the next part without wasting time. Or to be more precise, if you want a very precise definition of what they mean by succession, what they mean is after you complete the washing of one organ, you begin washing the next organ before the last one had time to dry. So if you wash your face 3 times, okay, then you're going to start washing your hands before your face had time to dry. And after you're finished washing your hands, you're going to wipe your head before your hands had time to dry. And after you wipe your head, you're going to wash your feet before your head had enough time to dry if you had actually washed it rather than wiped it. Okay, so when we say moving from one organ to the next organ, before there was enough time for the last organ to dry, we're treating it as if you're washing everything. So things that you wipe, such as the head and the ears, for purposes of this, you kind of imagine that you actually wash them, which requires more water, and therefore they take a little bit longer to dry. Okay, but you want to move to the next part of the wudu before the last part had time to dry. Okay, and when we say had time to dry, we're not talking about the literal conditions that you're in at the moment. You kind of need to just like imagine that you're in a place with moderate weather at a moderate time of year. So it's not like summer or winter. A moderate wind. It's not very windy. That you're in a moderate mood, because if a person's very angry, their body temperature might be a little bit warmer, and they might dry out faster. Okay, if you assume like just moderate everything, moderate mood, moderate part of the world, moderate season, moderate wind, and you assume that things that were wiped were actually washed, how much time would it take for, under those conditions, for whatever organ you just finished to dry? You make sure you move to the next organ before that much time has passed. This is what's meant by succession. All right, you move quickly from one step to the next step without wasting time. This is a sunnah in the Shafi'i school. So you should understand from that it's not required. Okay, this is recommended. Some people, they act all surprised when they find out that according to the Shafi'i school, you're allowed to start your wudu and, wash your face and wash your hands and then sit down and watch the football game and then wait till halftime and then go and wipe your head and wash your feet and then pray. Yes, you can do that. There's no rule in the Shafi'i school that says you have to move to the next step before the last step dried. In some madhabs, there is a rule like that. Okay, there are some madhabs where succession is obligatory. The Shafi'i madhab is not like that. In our madhab, it is a sunnah. It's something you're recommended to do and something you're rewarded for doing, but it's not something you have to do. Letter K. It says to begin with the right. Okay, so among the sunnahs of the wudu is for anything that you cannot easily do the right and left at the same time, then in that case, you do the right first. What do I mean by that? What I mean is when you start your wudu, you will start by washing your hands. It's easy to wash your both hands together. So in that case, you do them together. You don't start with the right and then do the left. You do them together, washing both hands to the wrists. Okay? Then you're going to rinse your mouth. We don't say rinse the right side of your mouth first and then rinse the left side of your mouth. No, you just put the water in your mouth and rinse the whole thing because it's easy to do them both at the same time. When you sniff water up your nose, you don't say sniff the right nostril first and the left nostril second. No, it's easy to do both at the same time. So you do both at the same time. Washing your face. It's easy to wash the right side of your face and the left side of your face at the same time. So what do? You do them at the same time. But when it comes time to washing your arms, this is something that it cannot easily be done at the same time. And since you can't easily wash the right and left at the same time, in that case, the sunnah is to do what? To begin with the right. So you want to wash your right hand to the elbow first. And after you've done that 3 times, which is a separate sunnah, then you move to the left arm and you wash that from the tips of the fingers to the elbow 3 times. When it comes time to wiping your head, it's easy to do both sides at once. So you do the whole thing at once. Your ears, it's easy to do both at once. So you do them at once. But when it comes to washing the feet, it's not easy to do them both at once. So what do? You start with the right foot, and after you've washed it 3 times, then you go to the left foot. Okay, I just want to make sure that this is clear. We don't say it's sunnah to start with the right in absolutely everything. No, it's sunnah to start with the right in things where you can't do both at the same time easily. And so what you should understand from that is that some people, because of their special situations, the rule would appear different to them. Imagine there's someone who had his left hand cut off. He doesn't have a hand. He only has a right hand. For that person, it's actually difficult for him to do both sides of his face at the same time. So for him, because he only has one hand, it is sunnah for him to do the right side of his face first and then the left side of his face second. Because he's in a situation where it's not easy for him to do them at the same time. When it comes time for him to wipe his head, it'll be sunnah for him to wipe the right side first and then wipe the left side second. To do the right ear first and then do the left ear second. Okay? He's in a different situation. All right? I'm giving this example so you understand the rule. The rule is when it's easy to do right side and left side at the same time, you do them at the same time. And only when it's not easy to do them at the same time do you do the right first and the left second. Insha'Allah, that is clear. Letter L. It says to increase beyond the limits of the face and limbs. What does he mean by increase? He means you wash beyond the boundaries of the face and beyond the boundaries of the limbs. So when you wash your face, when it's time to wash your face in the wudu, you're not going to wash only the face. You're going to start from a place that's like a little bit above the face. So actually a part that's actually part of your head. You're going to start there. You're going to go down. You're going to wash your ears. You're going to wash part of your underjaw. This part that's not really your neck, but the part that's under your jaw. You're going to wash part of that too, because it's sunnah to go beyond the boundaries of the face. Similarly, when you wash your arms, you only have to wash up to and including the elbow. But it's sunnah to go beyond the elbow. So you want to wash your upper arm as well. It's sunnah to go even as high as the shoulder when you make your wudu. And the same for the left arm. It's sunnah to go past the elbow and wash your upper arm, even going as high as the shoulder. And the same is true also for the feet. What's required is to wash up to and including the ankles. But what's recommended is to go beyond the ankle and wash your lower leg, even going as high as the knee. And that's for the right leg as well as the left leg. It's sunnah to go beyond the ankle and wash the lower leg. This is because our Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he said that the one who goes beyond the boundary of the face and goes beyond the boundaries of the arms and legs, then that extra part that he washed beyond the boundary, he'll be resurrected on the day of judgment with those extra parts illuminant, like light will be coming out of them. They'll be shining and shimmering, the extra parts that you wash. Okay, this is an indication that this is something good to do. Okay, so by telling us this, our Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam is encouraging us to wash beyond the boundaries of the face, beyond the boundaries of the arm, beyond the boundaries of the ankle. MashaAllah. Okay, so when it says here to increase beyond, what it means is just like wash further. That's what it means by increase. Increase the amount that you're washing. By washing the whole face, but then going beyond the boundary. Washing the whole part of the arm you have to wash, but then doing more. Increasing the amount that you wash. That's why he says increase there. Letter M. It says to avoid aid in pouring unless for an excuse. Okay, so one of the sunnahs of the wudu is to not let anyone else pour your water for you. Okay, so say you're making wudu. It's possible, it's permissible for you to sit there and let someone else pour water onto your face and then for you to just wash your face. Okay, it's permissible for you to just hold your arm out and let someone else pour the water on your arm and then you just rub it around. That's permissible. Okay, you're allowed to do that. But if you want to follow the sunnah and if you want the reward of the sunnah, avoid doing that. Pour the water yourself. You get water from, it is sunnah to take water in your right hand. You take water in your right hand and you pour it on your own head and you wash it around. You take water in your right hand and you pour it on your own right arm. You don't let someone else pour it on you unless you have an excuse, such as, I don't know, you have an injury or something, or you're missing an arm or something. If you have an excuse where you actually need the assistance of someone else, in that case, we don't say it's sunnah for you to avoid that assistance. Letter N. To avoid shaking off the excess water and wiping with cloth unless, let's just stop here. I'll get to the unless in a minute. It says letter N, to avoid shaking off the excess water. Okay, so when you make wudu, after you're finished, there's going to be water still on your body. And what some people do is they fling the water off. They go like this. They fling the water off of their body. Okay, it's sunnah to avoid doing that. It's sunnah to choose not to do that. You want to actually leave the water of your wudu on your body. That's because this water, it's the leftover traces of an act of worship that you did lillahi ta'ala. And therefore this water could potentially contain barakah. Okay, the water could have blessings in it because that water was used in worship to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So you don't want to just fling that water off like it's something worthless. Okay, so the sunnah is to avoid flinging off the water, flicking it, shaking it off, whatever word you want to use. You don't do that. Not from the arms, not from the feet, not from anywhere. Don't fling the water off. It says, and wiping with cloth. What do we mean when we say wiping with cloth? It means like drying. What some people do after they make wudu, what they do, they go get a towel, they dry their face. They dry their arms. This is what's meant by wiping with cloth. It means drying off. It's sunnah to avoid drying off. Okay, why? For the same reason. You want that water to stay on your body because that water might potentially have blessings in it. Why would it have blessings? Because the water was used in worship of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. There should be a link for the book at the top of the comment section. There isn't. There's the link. Barakallahu bikum. Okay, so do we understand the basic meaning of letter N? That the sunnah is to avoid flinging off the water or drying yourself after the wudu. Rather, you want to keep that water on you. And here, the translator, he makes a translation which I believe to be an incorrect translation. He said, unless in hot or cold climate. Okay, but I don't believe that the actual author of the text was talking about the climate. Okay, all he said is, unless it's hot or cold. The Arabic text says, unless it's hot or cold. This translator thought he was talking about weather. Like, are you in a hot climate, hot weather, or a cold climate, cold weather? I believe the author is talking about the water itself. Because if you think back to chapter 1, we were talking about how it's disliked for you to make wudu using water that's very hot or water that's very cold. Okay, it's disliked because it will distract you from the worship involved in making your wudu. And also it might, because the water is painful, it's so hot that it's painful or so cold that it's painful, you might not be careful to make sure the water goes everywhere it needs to go, which means you might actually not perform a valid wudu. So it's disliked to avoid extremely hot or extremely cold water. And here I believe that what the author meant is that if you did make wudu with very hot water or very cold water, which is disliked to do to begin with, but if you did do that, in that case, we don't say you should avoid flinging it off or avoid drying it off. No, this water is something that's hurtful to you. Okay, so definitely you should get it off your body. It's not sunnah in that case for you to fling it off or even dry it off. Okay, when is it sunnah to avoid flinging and drying? When the water was used in wudu and it's not extremely hot nor extremely cold. Then he says, or in fear of, he says impurification, but what he means here is contamination by najasa. Okay, if you're in a place where you're afraid that some najasa is going to come into contact with you while you have that water, while your skin is still moist from your wudu, and therefore it's going to contaminate you, well, then in that case, there's no harm in drying off or flinging the water so that you can dry faster. Because once you dry, then you don't get contaminated by touching najasa unless that najasa is wet. You understand? So these would be cases where it's not sunnah for you to avoid doing those things. If the water is very hot or very cold, or if you have a fear that you'll be contaminated with najas filth, in these cases, we don't say it's sunnah for you to leave the water on you. In these cases, it's okay. It's not against the sunnah for you to fling the water or dry it off. Some people go so far as to say that flinging off the water or drying off is disliked. Some people say it's disliked to do that, but I was taught that it's not disliked to fling the water or dry off. Okay, if you choose to fling the water or if you choose to dry off the water, this is mubah, it's permissible. Okay, but it's rewardable for you to avoid doing that. This is what I was taught, but from a definition perspective, this explanation does have some, it leads to some questions, mashallah. In any event, don't do it. Okay, the water is good to leave on your body. Letter O. He said it is recommended to move one's ring. Okay, what does that mean? Recommended to move one's ring. There's a little note, number 22, which I'm going to read. It says to allow the water to get underneath. If the water can't get underneath, it is no longer recommended, but obligatory. What does that mean? It means there's a point in the wudu when you need to wash your finger. Which point is that? It would be after you've washed your face and before you wipe your head. During the part of the wudu, which is for the washing of the hands, forearms, and elbows. In that part of the wudu, you have to wash your entire hand. So if you're wearing a ring, you need to wash whatever is underneath that ring. And so what that means is, if the water would get under your ring, whether you moved it or not, if the water would get under that ring and wash what's under there anyway, then in that case, we say it's recommended for you to move the ring so the water can get under where it was and then push it back. It's recommended to do that. Okay, recommended in what case? If the water would have gotten under there anyway. But if you're in a situation where the ring is very tight, for example, and the water would not get under the ring by itself, in this situation, it's not recommended for you to move the ring. Rather, in this situation, it's an obligation for you to move the ring, because you have to get the water down to wash that part of the ring that's beneath the ring. I'm sorry, to wash that part of the finger that's beneath the ring. So you have to move the ring if that's the only way for the water to get to the place it needs to wash. You understand that distinction? Okay, when it's necessary in order to perform the wudu properly that you move your ring, well, then it's obligatory for you to move it. If it's not necessary, if it's possible for you to wash your entire hand without moving the ring, in that case, it's recommended. It's sunnah to move the ring. Letter P. Tell me if I'm going too fast. But it's kind of a long list, and we want to get through it, mashallah. Letter P. Among the sunnahs of wudu, and I remind you, these things are all optional. All these things here are what? Recommended matters, not things that you have to do. Letter P. Among the sunnahs of wudu is to begin with the highest point of the head and to begin with the fingers and toes. Okay, so when you wash your face, the sunnah is to start the washing of the face from the top of the face, up here. You put the water up here and you wash downwards. That's sunnah. Okay, your wudu would still be valid if you started by washing your cheeks first and then washed upwards. Your wudu would still be valid, but the sunnah is to start at the top of the head and wash downwards. Similarly, when it comes to washing your hands, the sunnah is to start with the tips of the fingers. So you pour the water at the tips of the fingers, and then you wash downwards. You pour the water at the tips of the fingers and wash downwards. For your feet, you pour the water at the tips of the toes and wash towards the ankle. This is the sunnah, but this is only the sunnah what? If you're pouring the water for yourself, which is the norm. Like that's normally how it is. You pour the water for yourself. So you want to start with the tips of the toes, the tips of the fingers, and the top of the face. It says, if someone else pours the water, then the sunnah is what? To begin with the elbow and the ankle. So if for whatever reason you're not able to pour your own water, okay, someone else is pouring the water on you. In that case, when they pour water for your face, they want to start at the top of the face. So the water flows downwards. So there's no difference in that case. But when it comes to the arms, if someone else is pouring the water on you, they don't start by pouring the water at the fingertips. Rather, they start by pouring the water at the elbow and let it flow downwards towards the fingertips. Similarly for the feet, if someone else is pouring, they pour it at the ankle and let the water flow towards the toes. Letter Q. Among the recommended matters of wudu is to rub the limb. By rub, we mean you actually put some friction on it. Okay, so when you wash your face, how do I say this? What's required in the wudu is to wash your face. And the definition of washing is for the water to flow over it. So if a person were in the shower, for example, or if a person were in like a waterfall, that person could just put their face into the water and let the water just flow all over their face. Let the water flow on their face without touching their face at all. They don't have to touch with their hands or anything like that. As long as the water flows over the whole face, the wudu is valid. Okay? As long as the water flows over the whole face, the wudu is valid, because that means you washed your face. But the sunnah, the recommendation, is that you actually rub using your hands or using something other than your hands, that you actually rub. So you don't simply put your face under the water and let the water flow over your face, but you actually put your hands there and you rub all of the places that need to be washed. That you don't merely put your hand under the faucet and let the water flow everywhere, but you actually rub your arm. Okay? The sunnah is to rub these places. Right? When it comes to wiping your head, it would be enough for you to just touch your head like this. I mean, assuming there's no kufi here, you could just go like this, but the sunnah is to rub your hands across your head. For your feet, the sunnah is to rub on it, not merely to just stick your feet under the water and let the water flow over it. Although letting the water flow over it is valid, it's sufficient. You don't have to rub. Rubbing is recommended. That's why it's listed in this chapter, the chapter of the things that are sunnah, the things that are recommended. Okay, and that's why it was not mentioned among the 6 things that you have to do in your wudu. Okay, by now you've observed that the number of optional parts of the wudu is much greater than the number of required parts. The wudu only requires 6 things, but there are many more than 6 things that are optional and recommended. Letter R, to wipe the inner canthas of the eyes. Okay, what he means are the corners. Okay, the parts of the eyes here in this corner, the parts of the eyes here in this corner, like the outside corners, the inside corners, it's even good. I find it's good to wipe along the bottom eyelid. It's sunnah to wash these parts. Okay, it's sunnah to wipe them, rather. To wipe them with something as part of your wudu. Okay, of course, it's obligatory to wash them. The water has to flow over all of these parts in order for your wudu to be valid. But when it comes to wiping them, it's a sunnah to wipe them particularly. Okay, and if there's something there that would prevent the flowing water from reaching everywhere, well, then it would be an obligation to remove it. Some people, they get sleep in their eye or cold or whatever you want to call it. They get a kind of, buildup in the corners of their eyes when they're sleeping. And this buildup can sometimes prevent the water from flowing over that corner. So if there's sleep in your eye, you need to remove it and then make sure the water flows in there after it's been moved. Letter S, to face the qibla. So your wudu is going to be valid no matter what direction you're facing. But if you want the most reward and you want to follow the sunnah, then you want to face the direction of the qibla while making your wudu. Someone asked if you cannot wash your feet due to injury or surgery, is your wudu still valid? Well, I'm not sure what you mean by wash here. Okay, if you're able to turn on the faucet in your bathtub and water's pouring out of the faucet part of the bathtub, if you're able to stick your feet under there and let the water flow all over your foot, okay, well then that means you are able to wash your feet, because that's all that's required in your wudu, is for the water to flow over it. So as long as you're able to stick your foot under the faucet in the bathtub and the water flows over your whole foot, then in that case we say you can wash your feet. You are able to wash your feet, so therefore you must do it. So if all you're asking about is it permissible to skip the rubbing and just pour water all over your foot, well, the answer is yes, that's permissible, as long as the water flows over everything, including the bottom of the foot and including the back. It needs to flow over every part of the foot that needs to be washed. If you've done that, then you have done what's required. Remember, rubbing is recommended. It's not required. You don't have to rub at all. Letter T. It says to place the container on one's right side. And then he says, if there is room. Okay, the author of the book, may Allah have mercy on him, he wasn't saying if there's room on the right side. He says, in kana wasi'an. Okay, he's not, in kana wasi'an, it means if it's wide. The translator thought it meant if the place that you're making wudu is wide enough to have room on the right, but that's not what the author is saying. What the author means here is if the container containing the water has a wide opening. Okay? Remember, these books were all written centuries ago. People didn't usually have indoor plumbing like we have. People made wudu with like a bucket. If you had a bucket of water, well, guess what? A bucket has a wide opening at the top, wide enough that you can easily dip your hand into it. So if you have a container with a wide opening, then the sunnah is to place that container on your right. Why? Because it's sunnah for you to take water with your right hand. So a container with a wide opening, you want to put it on the right side of your body so that you can easily dip your right hand into it when you want to take water. Okay, so the container that has your water, if it has a wide opening, you put it on the right. However, if your container has a narrow opening, so narrow that you can't put your hand in it, like say, for example, you have a bottle of water, or you have like a 1 liter or 2 liter bottle of water, and that's what you're making your wudu from. In that case, the sunnah is to put the bottle of water on your right, on your left side. You put it on the left side because you can't dip your hand into it. So what are you going to have to do? You're going to have to lift up that bottle of water with your left hand, and then you're going to pour it into your right hand so that you can be taking water with your right hand. Okay, so if the container has a narrow opening, you put the container on your left. That way you can lift it up and pour it into the right hand. But if the container has a wide opening, you put the container on the right side so you can just dip your right hand into it directly. This is what the author, may Allah have mercy on him, meant when he said if it's wide. He doesn't mean if you have a lot of room. He means if the container is wide enough for you to put your hand in. Letter U. That one's water isn't less than a mud. Okay, I remind you that a mud is the amount that an average-sized adult man can hold if he puts his two hands together to make like a bowl. If he puts his hands together like this to make like a bowl, how much can he hold in his hands? Okay, that's called a mud. Our Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam used to make his wudu, complete with all of these sunnahs. He used to make his wudu with 1 mud of water. And so it's sunnah for us to use 1 mud of water or more. Okay, it's sunnah for us not to use less than that. Okay, according to this text, the sunnah is that the amount of water you use is not less than 1 mud. And that's because our Prophet, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he used to use 1 mud. Letter V. It is recommended that one doesn't speak during all one's wudu unless for a benefit. Okay, so among the sunnahs of wudu is for you to stay silent, or I don't want to say stay silent, but for you to not talk to anyone else during your wudu. Okay, it's perfectly fine for you to be mumbling du'as and things like that. So I'm not saying you have to be perfectly quiet, but you shouldn't be talking to people when you're making your wudu. Okay, the sunnah of wudu is to refrain from doing that while you're making your wudu. Okay, to the point where even if somebody salams you, it's okay for you to not return the salam if you're making your wudu. Okay, that's how important it is that you not speak to people. Okay, that doesn't mean, though, that you have to give him like a cold shoulder. When you finish your wudu, you can return it then. You can say after you finish, you can say to him, wa alaikum assalam, wa rahmatullah. But while you're making the wudu, you don't want to speak to people. He says, unless it's for a benefit. Okay, if there's some kind of benefit in that case, then then it's not sunnah for you to refrain from speaking. What's an example of a benefit? Like you notice the person next to you missed a spot on his wudu. In that case, you say to him, hey, you missed a spot. Go wash this part over again, for example. Because there's a benefit in that. There's a benefit in ordering what's right and forbidding what's wrong. That would be an example of a benefit. Or if you see that harm is going to come to somebody. You're making your wudu in a place where you can see through the window. There's a blind man walking down the street and he's about to walk into a pit. So you call out to him, hey, blind man, stop walking. There's a benefit in doing that. But if there's no benefit in the talking, which is usually the case, then it's recommended for you to just not engage in that talking. Letter W. It says one should not splash one's face with the water. Okay, the recommendation when you make wudu is to pour water onto whatever needs to be washed. So you're going to take water, you're going to pour it onto your face. You're not going to take water and splash it in your face like that. You're not going to slap yourself with water. Okay, doing that, the sunnah is to avoid that. You don't want to take water and throw it at your face. Okay, you want to take water and just casually pour it and spread it around your face, mashallah. Okay, same with your arms, your feet, everywhere. You don't want to be throwing water at yourself, splashing yourself with it, slapping yourself with water. Okay, these things are, this is something to avoid in the wudu. Letter X. It says one should not wipe the neck. Okay, you will sometimes see Muslims when they make their wudu, they'll like wash their face, and then when they're done, they take the back side of their hands and they wipe the back of their neck or the front of their neck like that. Okay, this is something that the Hanafis do, and in their madhab, I believe it's something that they teach. Like they believe this is something that's good to do. But in the Shafi'i school, this is considered a bid'ah, and we do not do that. Okay, it's recommended that you avoid doing that. Do not wipe the neck while you make your wudu. Letter Y. And this is the last one in the list of things that are recommended in the wudu. And that is to say this dua after it. Okay, our Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he said that whoever makes wudu and then says this dua, then on the day of judgment, all 8 of the gates of paradise will be open for him, and he can enter by whichever gate he chooses. Okay, you should understand from this hadith that our Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam, he means whoever says that consistently. He doesn't mean whoever says it one time in his life, but the person who consistently, when they make wudu, they say this dua, that person, inshallah, has his choice of which gate of paradise he wants to enter through. This dua is as follows. It says to say after it, Ashhadu an la ilaha illallahu wahdahu la sharika lah, wa ashhadu anna Muhammadan abduhu wa rasuluh, Allahumma ij'alni min at-tawwabin wa ij'alni min al-mutatahhirin. Then this next line, which says, وَاجْعَلْنِي مِنْ عِبَادِكَ الصَّالِحِينَ. This next line is in the text. It's part of the text of the Hadrami introduction, but that part right there is not in the hadith. Okay, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, when he said, the one who makes wudu and then says this gets the benefit of entering the paradise through whatever doors, the Prophet did not say, وَاجْعَلْنِي مِنْ عِبَادِكَ الصَّالِحِينَ. All right, that line was added by Imam al-Ghazali rahimahullah, and many Shafi'is say it, but just for your own benefit, that particular line is not in the hadith that our Prophet said. After that, the hadith continues, Subhanaka Allahumma wa bihamdika ashhadu an la ilaha illa ant astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk. So I'll say it one more time, the way it is in the hadith. meaning I'm going to leave out that one line. It says, Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah wahdahu la sharika lah, wa ashhadu anna Muhammadan abduhu wa rasuluh. Allahumma ja'alni min at-tawwabin wa ja'alni min al-mutatahhirin. Subhanaka Allahumma wa bihamdika ashhadu an la ilaha illa ant astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk. It means, I bear witness that there is no God except Allah, the One. He has no partner. And I bear witness that Muhammad is his slave and messenger. O Allah, make me of those who repent to you, and make me of those who seek purification. Then the part that is not originally in the hadith is this next part that says, and make me of your righteous slaves. That part there was added by Imam al-Ghazali. Then the next part of the hadith, it says, Subhanaka, which I don't know who was the first one to translate it as glory to you, which has somehow become like the default translation of Subhanaka. But Subhanaka does not mean glory to you. Okay, a person can look in any tafsir, look in the books of Arabic language, see the meaning of Subhanaka. It means that we're saying you, O Allah, are clear of that which does not befit you. Okay, Subhanaka is a statement of tanzih. It's a statement of clearing Allah of imperfections, clearing Allah of that which doesn't befit him. Okay, it's a declaration of his perfection. It's not saying it's not glory. Okay, but we say Subhanaka Allahumma wa bihamdika. It's what we're doing is we're saying you're clear of what doesn't befit you, O Allah. Wa bihamdika, meaning, and we're also praising you in the process. I bear witness that there is no God except you. I seek your forgiveness and repent to you. This is the meaning of the dua. This dua, I strongly encourage those of you who have not memorized it to memorize it. And to say it every time you make wudu. Even if you make wudu in the bathroom, just wait till you step out of the bathroom and then say it. Okay, this wudu is extremely beneficial, mashallah. And if you start doing it consistently, you may be among those who chooses to enter the paradise from whichever gate you wish. I ask Allah to make us among them. Ameen. And the last thing that the author says in this chapter, he says there is no problem in making dua at the time of washing the limbs. Okay, so the author, the Allama Bafadl, rahimahullah, he adds here that, there's nothing wrong with making dua as you make your wudu. And what he's referring to there, so there are a number of weak hadith, like very, very, very weak hadith that mention certain du'as to say as you make your wudu. Like as you wash your face, there's a certain dua to say. And as you wash your hands, there's a certain dua to say. As you're rinsing out your mouth and your nose, there are duas to say. Okay, there's like a number of weak hadith that suggest duas to say during all of these parts of the wudu. These hadith are extremely weak to the point where the scholars will not refer to these duas as sunnah. You won't hear the scholars say it's sunnah to say this dua, it's sunnah, it's sunnah, it's sunnah. So that's why in this chapter that mentions the sunnahs of wudu, the only dua that's mentioned is the one we just said. Okay, the fairly long one that we just said. That's the only dua that's mentioned here in the chapter about sunnahs of wudu. But he closes by simply saying, there's nothing wrong with saying duas as you're making your wudu. Duas, as you're washing the various organs of your body in the course of your wudu. There's nothing wrong with it, but it just doesn't count as sunnah. Okay, don't expect that you're going to get the reward of a sunnah of wudu by saying those duas, because the hadith that they come from are extremely weak. Okay, but nonetheless, dua in general is something that's rewardable. Making dua to Allah in general is a good thing. And so there's no harm in making dua, even if you're in the middle of your wudu. There's no harm in making dua at that time, but just don't don't consider it to be a sunnah of wudu. Consider it just to be that you're making dua while you're making wudu. Okay. And with that, we'll end today, insha'Allah ta'ala. Wa sallallahu ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallim. Next week, insha'Allah, we'll pick up with some of the things that are disliked in wudu and the conditions of wudu. And we may even begin the section about wiping over khufs if we have time. Of course, that section is something that I always get a lot of questions about. If you have questions, please put them in the box. I'll start reviewing comments now for questions. Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh, for all of those who salammed me. There it is. Someone made a comment about having an injured foot and making tayammum. Okay, this is a somewhat complicated question, and there's a lot more details of what I'm going to get into right now. But just so everyone knows what this comment is about, and so everyone's aware, so that if you're in this situation, you know to ask to get more information and more detail. If you have an injury on one of the places that needs to be washed or wiped in your wudu, and because of the injury, you cannot wash or wipe everything that needs to be washed or wiped. In that case, what's required of you is to do as much of the wudu as you possibly can. So imagine, for example, that someone has a cast covering, their hand from the middle of the fingers to the middle of the forearm. So their wrist is completely covered, their palm is completely covered, their fingers are covered almost all the way to the end. Okay. How can this person make wudu? They need to wash all of that stuff that's underneath their cast, but they can't remove the cast. What do? In this case, they make wudu like normal, meaning that they're going to wash their face, which is the first organ that you're obligated to wash. If they want to wash hands and mouth and nose before that, that's fine. But after they wash their face, when it comes time for them to wash their arm, they're going to wash as much of the arm as they're able to. So they're going to wash their elbow and what's below the elbow. They're going to wash as much of their forearm as they can, right up to that cast. They're going to wash the tips of their fingers and whatever they can wash on the other end of the cast. Okay. And they're going to wash their left hand, of course, which doesn't have a cast on it. But as for the cast itself, which they cannot remove, what will they do? They're going to take their hand, which is still moist, and they're going to wipe over it. Because they're not able to wash what's under the cast, they're going to wipe on the outside of the cast, which is the most that they're able to do. Why would they do that? Because our Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, if I command you to do something, then do as much of it as you're able to. Okay, so you don't just skip something just because, you don't skip washing this part of your hand just because you can't get the water to it. You do what you're able to, which means you just wipe on top of the cast. Okay, but the fact remains, even though you wiped on the cast, you have not washed the skin that's under the cast. And in order for your wudu to be valid, the skin under the cast needs to be washed, which means it's actually not even possible for you to make a valid wudu. It's not possible for you while you have the cast on. And because you're not able to make wudu, what will you do? You make tayammum. So before you move on in your wudu, when you're still in the part of the wudu where you need to wash your hands, you make a tayammum using soil. You do this tayammum because you're not able to make wudu. And then after you've made the tayammum, you continue. You can now move on with your wudu. You can wipe your head, wipe your ears, wash your feet, do all of that stuff. And then you go pray. But you need to understand that the reason why you're able to pray is because of the tayammum. The tayammum made you able to pray. As for the wudu, all of that washing and stuff of the wudu, you only did that because the Prophet ﷺ said, if I command you to do something, do as much of it as you're able to. So you do, as much of the wudu as you're able to. And then, since it's insufficient, you make a tayammum. But you don't make tayammum after the wudu, and you don't make your tayammum before the wudu. You make your tayammum in the part of the wudu where the problem is. So if the cast was on your hand, you would make your tayammum after you wash your face and before you wipe your head, during the part of the wudu when you wash your hands. If your cast had been on your foot, then you would make your tayammum after you wipe your head, during the part of the wudu where you wash your feet. That's where you make the tayammum at that time. Insha'Allah ta'ala, that's clear. There's a lot more detail here, though. So if you're in this situation, I encourage you to ask a knowledgeable person that you're in touch with. Insha'Allah ta'ala. Those of you who have my Facebook page, you can always DM me questions on my Facebook. So someone asked about being in a bathroom with a toilet there. And yes, that's what's meant by bathroom, meaning a place where people actually relieve themselves. Okay, if you're in a bathroom, like say a public bathroom, where the stalls have doors that close and you're over at the sink, well, then you're not in the bathroom. You can say the name of Allah at the sink. Okay, but if you're at a bathroom in your house where the toilet and the sink are in the same room, in this case, it's disliked for you to say the name of Allah in that situation. So what you can do is wash your hands at the sink, and by that you started your wudu. Step outside the bathroom for a second and just say Bismillahi awwalahu wa akhirah, which you say if it's in the middle of your wudu. Step back in the bathroom and complete your wudu. And as for the dua that you say when your wudu is done, don't start saying the dua until after you leave the bathroom. Okay, there's no rule that says you have to say that dua within 1 second of completing your wudu. No, you can finish your wudu, exit the bathroom, and then once you're in the hallway, start saying the dua, insha'Allah ta'ala. But definitely avoid saying the name of Allah in the bathroom. I never heard that it's sunnah to drink the leftover water in the container after a wudu. No, I didn't hear that. Probably if someone heard that, it's because of the numerous hadith of the Sahaba drinking Prophet Muhammad's leftover water, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. But they drank his leftover water because his water was full of barakah. Okay, the water that he touched with his hands became a source of blessings for people. So of course the Sahaba used to rush to get that water. They would drink it, they'd put it on their bodies and everything else because it's a source of blessings. So there are a number of hadith about that, but I always understood those hadith to be specifically about Prophet Muhammad's leftover wudu water, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. I don't know that there's any benefit in doing that for us regular people. But I tell you, if you have the, mashallah, the honor of being in the presence of someone who's a wali, a very high status wali, then, you might want to drink his leftover wudu water, just in case there's some blessings there as well. If your feet are peeling or have any kind of medical condition on the feet, the question that you need to answer is, would it be harmful to wash for the water to flow over those places? Um, if it's not harmful for water to flow in between the toes or over wherever you have this skin condition, then your obligation is to wash it with water because you're not harmed by it. Okay. However, if washing with water is going to cause you harm, and what I mean by harm here is if you use water, you're going to die. Or if you use water, you're going to lose the use of one of your bodily organs. Or I mean that if you use water, you're going to become sick. Or if you use water, your existing sickness is going to get worse or last longer. Or if you use water, you're going to become deformed in your face or in your hands. If using water is going to cause these kinds of harms, then in that case, you are permitted to make tayammum instead of making wudu because the water is harmful to you. But I'm not aware that something like eczema or athlete's foot causes that degree of harm. In these cases, you just wash with water and you'll be fine, insha'Allah ta'ala. Again, I mean, maybe I'm not understanding what eczema really is like, but I'm not aware that eczema on the hands will cause your hand to stop working if you wash it with water. If it will cause a severe disformity in your hand, like if your skin will turn to something resembling fish scales, then in that case we say that using water is harmful to you and you make tayammum instead. But I mean, I don't know. You would have to speak to some kind of doctor or maybe I would need to speak to a doctor to really understand the ramifications of things. But I don't understand these conditions to be the level of severity that would mean you don't need to wash your hands. But you can always use a small amount of water. If using a lot of water is harmful, well, remember that you don't need to use a lot of water in your wudu. Okay, I've seen a person, like, if you look at this bottle here, this bottle holds like a regular normal bottle of water level of stuff. I've seen a person who had this much, like the silver part at the bottom, worth of water in his bottle of water, and he made wudu with that. Okay, you don't need to use a whole lot of water to make your wudu. It's possible to make your wudu with a small amount of water, especially if you do everything just one time instead of 3 times. So if you're concerned that the water is going to, I don't know, cause some kind of discomfort or some kind of mild irritation, then maybe you choose to wash that part only 1 time instead of 3 times. And maybe you choose to use a small amount of water instead of using a whole lot of water. And in general, it's good to use a small amount of water when you make your wudu. Okay, it's possible to make wudu with less than 1 mud of water. It's definitely possible. But as we said, it's recommended to not use less than 1 mud. Okay, but 1 mud is enough to do this whole wudu with all of these sunnahs we talked about. 1 mud is enough. Someone mentioned having metal in their ankle. What's required is for you to wash your whole foot up to and including the ankle. You don't have to wash higher than the ankle. That's recommended. It's not required. So if you wash your foot up to and including the ankle, then you've done what's required. This is good enough. Also, I remind you that you don't have to rub. Okay, sometimes people trying to bend over and rub their feet, it puts them in very difficult situations or difficult positions, especially if there's not a whole lot of space. You can just stick your foot under some running water and make sure that your ankle and your whole foot has the water flow over it. This is very easy to do in a bathtub. You just turn on the faucet, where the water, the part that fills up the bathtub. Turn on the lower faucet part. You could just stand or even sit on the end of the bathtub and stick your foot under the water. Yes, it's possible to use less than 1 mud of water in your wudu. It's possible. I don't recommend that. Most of us don't have the practice to be able to recognize when the water is flowing under your hand and when it stopped flowing and now you're just wiping. I think for most of us, use a little bit more water so that you don't have to worry about that particular issue. Are there any other questions before we sign off? Okay, well then let's say La ilaha illallah. La ilaha illallah. La ilaha illallah. La ilaha illallah. Allahumma salli ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallim. Allahumma salli ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallim. Allahumma salli ala Sayyidina Muhammad وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم. رب اغفر لي وللمؤمنين والمؤمنات. رب اغفر لي وللمؤمنين والمؤمنات. رب اغفر لي وللمؤمنين والمؤمنات. بارك الله فيكم. I will see you inshallah ta'ala next week at the normal time. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh.